the Start Your Own Business podcast. Hear inspiring startup stories and get reliable expert advice on how to start your business and get off to the best possible start. Brought to you by Startup Donut, helping small businesses succeed.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. You're listening to the Start Your Own Business podcast. My name's Fiona Pryor and I'm your host. In this episode, I'll be trying to get tips on how to start and run a successful small retail business. There are more than 310,000 retail businesses in the UK, which is almost 6% of all businesses, and 99% of these are small and medium-sized businesses. Many of them are also among the most exciting, contemporary and brilliant brands and businesses in the UK, and there are many, many amazing success stories out there. But what's the reality if you're thinking of starting your own small retail business? Are you mad to even contemplate doing it in this day and age? And if not, where do the good opportunities lie? How do you create a strong retail identity and brand? And how should you sell? Online, offline, or both? And what's the key to starting a successful small retail business that will last? Joining me in this episode to answer these questions is Catherine Erdly, a retail expert with more than 21 years' experience. 17 of them spent working for well-known high street names. Catherine now works exclusively with startups, independent brands and retails, helping them to grow their profits. Before we meet Catherine, here's a message from our sponsor.
Running a business is more challenging than ever. Square is here to help with a retail point-of-sale system that includes payment, inventory management and e-commerce, and that's just for starters. Take fast payments anywhere, over the phone, online or in person, quickly and easily. Accept exchanges and returns seamlessly. Sell online with a professional e-commerce site. Square is tailor-made for all retailers, whether you're a small business or a multi-location retailer. Choose the hardware that meets your specific business needs, whether you need a simple card reader or a fully integrated point of sale. Named the best overall POS system for restaurants in 2024 and used by over 4 million businesses, Square has custom product suites for all businesses, from restaurants and retail to beauty. Easy to use and with no hidden costs, Square will help your business fly. Find out more about how Square can help your business at square.com.
Well, it's now time to meet our expert, Catherine Erdly of the Resilient Retail Club. Hi there, Catherine. Thanks for joining us. It's good to speak to you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I wanted to start by asking you about your career because you've had a long and varied career in retail, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So this is my 24th year in the retail industry. I started in the year 2000. Well, actually, that's not strictly true. I'd even been working in retail before that, but more like a summer job, a Saturday jobs. But I started my professional career in retail in the year 2000, and I spent nearly 2 decades working for the high street retailers, names like Laura Ashley, the Austin Reed Group, Paper Chase, and I worked in a number of different retailers, both in the UK and the USA. And then in 2018, decided to start my own business. So since then, it's been 6 years this year, I've been working exclusively with independent startup retailers and brands and helping them with their sales strategy and profitability.
So what drove that change of focus to the smaller end of the retail market?
I was always drawn to small independent retailers. My happy place, if you like, is going to, say, a market and being able to see what everyone's doing. And I was so taken with the passion that's really infused into all of these people starting their own businesses. And I really fell in love with the fact that when you work for a big retailer, you have to create products that maybe 10,000 people want to buy. And as a result, that can mean that the products can get kind of watered down, maybe a bit bland. Whereas if you're a small business, a small retailer, you can create product that one person wants, right? You know, you could sell on Etsy a personalized t-shirt with I love my Labradoodle. I have a Labradoodle, so it springs to mind. But you know, you can create something that is hyper specific to one person, and I absolutely love that. And as a result, I just found that the smaller end of the market was just full of people who genuinely wanted to do something better, who wanted to leave the world and the people they interacted with and their customers better than they were when they found them, that were really conscious of the impact that they were having, and just wanted to create amazing things that people loved. And I felt like that was a spark that had been missing for a long time from the big retailers that I worked from. So I'm absolutely delighted and privileged that I get to work with small SME businesses every single day.
You mentioned there about the sort of difficulties that the retail market has had in the high street, and we all know the damage that COVID has done to the economy, the state of inflation and the impact that's had on families and their purchasing power, and on small businesses. So what are things like out there for small retailers at the moment? Is it a good time to start a small retail business?
It's easy to see the headlines and see all of these retailers going into administration and feeling really concerned about it and feeling like, well, why on earth would I open a shop? But the phrase I love, which I often think about, is that it's not that retail is dead, it's that boring retail is dead.
Yeah.
And so many of these names that have gone into administration, they just weren't connecting anymore with people. They weren't showing anything different, interesting. What I am seeing is I have several clients. I have a mastermind group and I have several clients in there who are bricks and mortar stores, and they are super heart-led. They're connected to their community. They are really passionate about the product that they've got. They are out there talking to their customers every single day. They know their customers really well, and they are flourishing. I think that there is absolutely place and space for people who are passionate about what they're doing to be opening retail stores. I think, they often say about the British, we're a nation of shopkeepers, and I think in our hearts we are, and I think that my sort of positive vision for the high street is that we'll get more diversity, we'll get more different people opening shops, we'll get more interesting shops doing interesting things, becoming those community hubs. For me personally, I see a very positive story for small and independents. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying there is 100% a place for it, and I feel pretty optimistic about it, to be honest.
I think the difference with a smaller business is that, as you say, you can build connections with your audience. So what they want, the people as individuals and as customers, what their personal preferences are. And so you can perhaps tailor your stock more to meet their tastes. You've got that personal connection. They come back because it's not just about, what's in the shop. It's about the connection with you. And I think you can be nimble as well. If something's not working, you're not saddled by having tens of thousands of units of something that's, sticky to shift, that's stuck on the shelves that you're having to slash. Actually, you can try, we'll have a few of these. We'll have, a small number. You can try local stockists, local manufacturers, local producers. And you can be more flexible, and you're not tied to one specific idea. You can be a bit more nimble, and like you say, with the connecting with your audience, we've got a bookshop. Once a month they have live music in, and they've got a book club, and they come in and there's a book of the month, and so people come in, they enjoy a glass of wine, listen to some music, talk about the book. And so actually they're multifaceted now. You're not just going into a shop to purchase an item, you're going in for an experience, and it's possible to deliver that as a small business.
Yes, for sure. Well, that's a great example. And actually, somebody else that I worked with earlier this year, Sarah, her name is, she opened a business called The Kitchen Table in Dorset. And that was always her dream. She wanted to run a bookshop that specialised in food-themed books, so cookbooks and food-based literature. And it's been hugely successful. And what's so brilliant is that now they've managed to get onto the sort of author signing trail. So people who've just released a cookbook will come, they'll do an event, they might do a cooking demonstration. Like, what a fabulous thing to bring to your home community. Yeah. And people have really responded to that. And they absolutely love meeting all of these different authors and having this great experience. And I think that's the kind of thing for me is the model of retail moving forward. And she's absolutely smashed it and has been really embraced by their local community.
That's great news. Moving on, the key to retail, really, for business to consumer retailers, is that you need to be generating cash. You need to be cash positive. You might be buying your stock in wholesale, and have 30 days or 60 days credit on that, but you're selling for cash today, that goes straight back into your bank, and then you're paying your suppliers later. And this is how, traditionally the retail market has worked, and it has allowed some businesses to grow really quickly. But are sort of suppliers still extending credit to small businesses with the cost of living crisis that's going on at the moment?
Well, I think it really depends. I think you raise some really good points, and everything that I do is very much focused on profitability, because I feel very passionately that no product business should fail because they didn't understand how to make money, which is not as evident as it may seem when you first look at it, but it's definitely doable. But there's definitely a clear way that you need to look at things. One thing you absolutely 100% need to do is be nimble with your stock. So to your point earlier, you want to be thinking about testing and learning. You want to be thinking about keeping it really tight and really managing your stock carefully, because some suppliers might give you credit terms, but I don't think you can rely on it. It can be part of the negotiation. So many may ask for payment up front if it's the first time that you've bought from them. But if you've bought from them several times, then there's no reason why you can't negotiate on that. I think negotiation is a really key skill for anyone thinking of starting a product business, whether that's a bricks and mortar retailer or an online seller. But I think that the key really for me is to always think about how quickly you're going to get that money back. So in my opinion, the two things that really make a difference to the profitability of a product business is, number one, are you making enough money every time you make a sale? So that's being really conscious of how much is something costing you to bring into the business. Are you really clear about all of the costs, including if you've had to have it shipped to you, if you've had to pay duty, all of that kind of thing, being really clear about that. The second thing is, how quickly are you getting your money back after you've paid it out? So exactly as you said, you want to get that money back as quickly as possible. And so in an ideal world, you'd get credit terms from your supplier. So you could aim to get your sale before you've had to even pay for this stock. That may work, that may not work. It just really depends on the supplier, depends on your negotiation with them. But I think if you keep thinking about keeping it tight and trying to turn your stock as quickly as possible, then that helps keep you out of trouble. Yeah. And as I said, it's easier said than done, but it's really all about being aware of what's selling, what's working for you, what's turning quickly and doing more of that, and being not totally promotional driven all the time and trying to clear through stock if it's not moving, because I think discounting can have a negative impact in the long term. But just being really super aware of how much stock you've got and what's working, and I think that will all help. The other thing as well is, if you really are in a difficult situation with your cash flow and you really want to place an order with a supplier but you're just not in a position to do so, people are open to things like pre-orders. People are definitely far more open to the idea of, right, I'm going to pay for something now and I'm not going to see it for 4 to 6 weeks, for example, which I think 10 years ago people would just not have got that. Whereas now I think they understand that pre-orders, or some people almost like create crowdfunders to get their product out there, to be able to place those orders. And I think the customer's totally on board with those. You just have to make sure you trust your supplier, because having to unravel a pre-order that never showed up is a whole other issue. But yeah, I think definitely thinking about the timing of your money going out versus your money coming back in is really important as well.
Yeah, and part of that, I think, is making sure that you've offered customers payment, ways to pay that appeal to them. I mean, these days people are well used to going into a shop and tapping their card and walking away. Cash is still important for some businesses, so what payment options are you giving your customers so that you make the decision to buy something easy for them, and for other things you may be issuing an invoice, if you're you're dealing with supplying to to businesses, for example, you might invoice them, and then you've got to factor that into your cash flow.
Yeah, for sure. I think payment options is really key. I think you need to have a good range. partly because it also comes into play into your conversion rate. So your conversion rate is a key number that anybody, whether they're selling online or in a store, really needs to understand. So your conversion rate is the number of people who buy from you compared to the number of people who've either come to your website or come into your store. So for example, if 100 people visit your website and 2 of them buy, then that is a 2% conversion rate, 2 out of 100. That actually, believe it or not, for an e-com site is fairly standard. So in a physical store, then you're talking about more like 10 to 15%, which personally I think is slightly at the lower end for a physical store. 10 to 15% of people who come in will buy. If you really know your customer and you're really great with your customer service, then I've seen small independents be closer to say 50% or even above.
Yeah.
So over half the people who come in actually buy from them. But one of the things that does definitely impact the conversion rate is can they pay in the way that they want to pay?
Yeah.
So are you offering them a good breadth of payment range, whether that's in store or whether that's online? And I think that is really important, because at that crucial moment when they're thinking about making that purchase, they're right on that edge. You don't want anything to be in the way. And if they can't pay the way that they want, or if there's some friction, as we call it in retail, like friction in the process, to say, oh, well, actually, I've got to go to the cash machine now and get money out. Like, you don't want any of that happening. You want there to be a nice, clear, smooth path from the purchase decision to the purchase completion, and nothing to get in the way of that.
Yeah. There was another point that you made there that I just wanted to sort of wind back on, about making sure that you understand all of your costs. And I think, the Startup Donut team, we get lots of questions asked to us, and people are looking for information all the time around pricing and how actually that's quite tricky for some people. What markup should you be adding and things like that. Are you including all of your costs? Have you included postage? Have you included your time? Have you included the energy costs, all the raw materials, all those kinds of things, to get to a price where actually you are making money from the things that you're selling?
There's 2 things that I'd say. You absolutely have to know all of your costs.
Yep.
And if you don't feel embarrassed. I've actually worked for multi-million, £100 million businesses where we actually were selling cushions at one point, and somebody hadn't factored in the full cost of the shipping. And when we did, we worked out that actually we were losing money on these cushions. So all of that work had gone into creating them. And then because somebody hadn't properly calculated the shipping cost, we actually we were making less money than if we hadn't got them at all. Profit margins are they are absolutely the building block of what your business is built on from a financial perspective. So yes, definitely know all your costs. If you make something, please include your hours in the cost, because first of all, if you don't, you're working for free, and none of us want to work for free. And number 2, if you do get to the point where you've grown and you want to bring in a team, if you've not costed in how much it's going to cost you to pay someone else to make it, you can never afford to bring someone else in to make it, and you will only ever be able to sell what you yourself can produce, which, for some people that's their dream. So
yeah.
No criticism there, but it's something to be aware of. And then the other thing is that you have to know all of your costs. However, there's some schools of thoughts that say, okay, you take all of your costs and you multiply it by 4, for example, to get your retail price. But I think that's dangerous, because it's not rooted in reality. You need to know how much your customer normally pays for this sort of thing.
Yeah. And
you need to do a piece of research to help you understand what your price should be. Now, if you're a bricks and mortar store and you're buying in from other retailers, it's fairly straightforward, because they'll give you a recommended retail price. They'll tell you what other people are selling it for. So it's very straightforward. If you're making your own products, or having them manufactured, then you have to benchmark yourself. And the best way I suggest to do that is find 3 other people who make a similar product to you, and they make it in a similar way with similar quality materials. So that means if you have a small factory in Portugal making your product out of organic cotton, don't price compare yourself to somebody who has it manufactured in non-organic cotton from China and they make 100,000 at a time.
Yeah.
Don't compare yourself to Asda, for example.
Yeah.
find other people who are, it doesn't have to look exactly aesthetically like yours, but it should be made in a similar quantity, similar way of manufacturing. And then you can use that to start understanding, right, well, what are they charging? And therefore, where do I want to sit? And you don't have to be exactly the same as them. You could have a premium pricing model where you actually price yourself slightly above because you believe there's actually added value in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or you may go for a value proposition where you're slightly under them because, again, there may be something different about the products. Mostly for small businesses, it's hard to compete on price. So you're better off setting your prices roughly in line with your competitors, but with any adjustments you might feel you need to make.
Yeah. Moving away from pricing and stock management, where are the good opportunities for small retailers at the moment? What types of things are selling well for small retailers, and what do they need to be aware of if people are thinking of starting a small retail business?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. And I think that retail, effectively, I always like to clarify with retail, retail, if you look up the dictionary definition of retail, it is buying products and selling them. So retail, if you sell on Etsy, if you have a craft stall, you're part of the retail industry. You may not feel like that, but you are. And so I think when we talk about retail, I think there's two different distinct models that you could do if you wanted to start a retail business. You could have an e-commerce store, or you could have a bricks and mortar. So in terms of a bricks and mortar, I think that the what's working well, it will also depend on where you are, where you're based, and what other local competition you might have. Not to say that you can't open a lifestyle and gift store if there are lifestyle and gift stores in your hometown, because your look and feel will no doubt be very different to theirs. So there's definitely opportunities there. I think that, so then the question of what works well is kind of what would really add value to your local area. What are you passionate about? It's like, as we talked about Sarah and the kitchen table, that was her passion, and it really shines through into everything. So I think that if I were to be sitting here considering starting let's start with bricks and mortar. So bricks and mortar, then I would be thinking about, what am I passionate about? What do I feel like we don't have? You know, sometimes people will come and they'll open a kids shop because they realise there's absolutely nowhere to go for kids clothes in the local area anymore. Or shoes, for example, because that's another area where people love to try shoes on if they possibly can.
Yeah.
So I think that for bricks and mortar, it's definitely about really tuning into, where do you want to be? Why do you want to be there? What are you passionate about? What can you add to the local area? I think with e-commerce, obviously, then it's a huge, the world is your oyster.
Yeah.
You can pretty much choose anything. In terms of what's working well, I mean, fashion's still really important. Fashion accessories, people starting clothing brands, menswear, women's wear, kids wear. I've seen all of those working. Again, if they're really centered in this sustainability, so people who are concerned about who want to talk to the conscious consumer. I think that is a real consistent across everyone. If you're a bricks and mortar store or e-commerce, the one thing you really need to be aware of is that today's consumer, or a growing proportion of them, they do care. They care where it's made, they care who made it, they care what it's made of, they care what environmental impact that you're having on the world. So all of those things I think are really important to take into consideration. And then in terms of e-commerce, as I said, lots of different areas are working well. I think big themes we've seen over the last couple of years have been mindfulness, self-care. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So people really are interested in looking after themselves. And the other one, which is, I think, is maybe a slightly shorter term, but something to think about, is travel. People are really embracing travel post-COVID. And I think we're seeing that as a really strong theme coming through. So I think, again, though, I would say with e-commerce, you want to think about what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
The biggest growth areas as well, things like babies people always spend on kids, even when times are tough. And pets is another one. More and more people, so many people got dogs and pets during the pandemic. I think that that's an area that's still really buoyant. But I think that, again, with all of those, I would caveat it by saying, what are you passionate about? What do you really enjoy? Because you're going to have to be talking about this a lot
Yes.
to customers, to market it. So don't just pick something that you've got no real interest in, but you think maybe it's got a good chance of success. I've seen people build successful e-commerce businesses on everything from sheepskin slippers to retro tees to fun, colourful clothing, skincare, hair care. Lots of different product areas can work, but I think it's about really, really being passionate about it and doing something that you're excited about.
Yeah, and that ties in. I was reading earlier in the month about the record numbers of independent record shops that are opening up. So there's that whole trend. So it's another thing to be thinking about is what are the trends, what are people interested in, and that whole sort of switch back to vinyl records has really been seen on the our local high streets. The numbers of independent record stores are going through the roof. So yes, definitely be thinking about sort of what the trends are, what people are interested in, what are people's latest hobbies. So yeah, those kinds of things.
Secondhand, vintage. A lot of the younger generation are absolutely, loving secondhand. They don't necessarily even always want to buy brand new all the time. So I think that's a really big area. And I remember a couple of years ago, actually it was pre-pandemic, so it was probably about 2019, I was hearing a talk from someone who said the resale industry is going to be bigger than fast fashion by 2028. And I remember resale being basically secondhand. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a bold statement. But actually, I can totally see it. You think about marketplaces like Vintage. You think about eBay that sells one secondhand piece of fashion every second, basically.
Yeah.
I can totally see that we are swinging that way. So I think there is still, I don't think that, you can only start a business for secondhand, but I think it's good to be aware of it. And I'm also seeing lots of people incorporating circularity elements into their businesses. So they're doing things like offering free repairs or offering people the opportunity to resell the product that they bought from them in the first place. But they're doing it through their own platform. So they're kind of keeping that customer relationship within their platform.
Yeah, completely. So if someone's thinking of starting a retail business, do they need to be thinking solely offline or online, or is it possible for them to do both? And should they be doing both, in fact?
Well, I think that it's two very different businesses, because the thing I always say is that running a shop is a full-time job and running a website is a full-time job. So I think that they're very different. If you're somebody who's very extrovert and you really love talking to people and you really want to be part of your local community, I think getting a space in a town, a bricks and mortar, creating something that's a real passion project, I think can be phenomenally rewarding and really, really a great way to build your business. If you really need flexibility, you don't know that you're going to be able to physically be in a shop this whole time, then I think e-commerce is a great place to start, because you can start even smaller. You can really start with a website and go from there. You can even start by selling on a platform like Etsy just to test things out. So I think it's a smaller commitment to start an e-commerce business, and there's nothing to say that you can't go offline at some point later. I know lots of people who started their businesses online and then have opened stores.
Yeah.
And I think, equally speaking, if you are a physical store, even though it is also a full-time job to have a website as well, I definitely think that almost all of the bricks and mortar stores that I work with have a website too, because it just allows them to reach a slightly different customer and maybe reach outside their local area as well. So I think that, let's say everyone needs to be online.
Yeah.
And if you've got and some people stay online and they never have bricks and mortar stores. And some people start with a bricks and mortar store and add a website later down the line. I think there's no one size fits all. I think it's a lot to do with what are you prepared to, what kind of lifestyle do you want with your business?
Yeah. So someone's made a decision. They decided they're going to go for it. The next step, I suppose, is getting your name out there. How important is it for a small retailer to create a brand identity or a unique identity for their business so that they stand out from those that are around them?
I think that when you first start out, you want to be, as you mentioned, nimble and lean. You want to avoid investing too much into really anything, including branding, I would say. So at the beginning, you're going to be learning an awful lot. I know people who start businesses and they end up rebranding, they end up changing the business name. So I wouldn't get too hung up on creating this perfect brand from the very beginning. I would get started, and I would start with very small numbers of products. I would start by figuring out what your customer wants. Actually, I'd start by talking to my customer before I even did anything. And so I think that there are certain areas where branding is important. If you're going to be going for the luxury market, if you're going to be charging multiple hundreds of pounds for your clothing, for your jewellery, or if you want to create a really high-end boutique experience, then yes, you probably do need to start off with decent branding from the get-go, because part of what you're selling is that real experience and that feel. I think for a lot of people, they're going to be able to start off with some basics. You want to be consistent. You want to know what your brand colors are, your brand fonts. Maybe you have a logo. And I think get going, and then over time, and when you get to that point where you can invest in full-on rebrand, then I think, there's a lot to be said for branding, and I think it can help. I just think that there's danger in investing in it too soon before you even really know what the brand stands for.
Yeah. So moving on, you're going down the retail route. You know what you want to start. You've then, I suppose, if you're not making yourself, got to find the suppliers, and you've got to negotiate the deals. And you've talked about this slightly earlier on about the importance of negotiating deals with people. What are the keys to success when you're negotiating with suppliers?
Well, I think it's being really clear about what you want. So I think, and also just being aware of the fact that, especially if you're brand new, especially if you've got no proven track record, then it may not be that you can negotiate from the get-go. There's nothing wrong with asking, but don't be surprised if if a massive supplier isn't going to roll over and give you exactly what you want when you're a small business that maybe doesn't even have much of a presence at the moment. So think about it like building relationships. So much of negotiation is about relationship building. And I think being really clear about what's the most beneficial thing for you. Is it that you just don't want to buy the minimum quantity that they say that you have to buy? So you could negotiate, okay, look, I'd love to buy from you, but I have to spend £1,000. Really what I'm in a position to spend is £200 on this product area. Is there something that we can work out? They can always say no, but you've got to ask.
Yeah. So
don't assume that you can't ask. I think things like delivery times, payment terms, even the pricing, although pricing, you get much more leverage the more you're ordering. So if you're only ordering a small amount, don't expect to have too much leverage on the pricing. But things like the minimum order quantity, there may be some flexibility. It's always worth asking.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that actually you might be able to get a better deal than you perhaps expect.
Yeah, but also I'd say a lot of if you're buying from a supplier that's used to selling to retailers, they will have their profit margins set up in a specific way. You should be expecting to make at least a 50% profit margin on those products. So don't feel like, oh, if I don't negotiate, everyone's, like going to pull the wool over my eyes type thing. I think it's saying that, the pricing should be fair. What you first get quoted should be fair, especially if you're dealing with a big supplier that's used to supplying retailers. So you can see if you can work with that. And maybe over time, as you build a relationship, there'll be an opportunity for you to negotiate better pricing. If someone's not offering you a 50% margin, if they saying, well, you can buy this from me for £6 and typically it's sold at £9, well, that's not actually structurally set up correctly anyway for you. So you could try negotiating, or it just may be that if they're a small supplier themselves, sometimes they don't even realise the margins that retailers need. So I think work out what the absolute maximum is that you can pay for something, and lots of suppliers will be set up like that anyway. But if you find people who aren't, you can either try negotiating, or you may just have to try and find an alternative supplier.
Yeah. We've talked in previous episodes about working with wholesalers, and Therese was able to give us some really good tips about buying from wholesale platforms and wholesalers. But if you're not looking to buy necessarily on a wholesale basis, where else can retailers go to find good suppliers? Where would you recommend they start?
Well, I think I mean, I think the trade shows are still really great place to start. So there'll be industry specific ones, but you've also got people like Spring Fair, Autumn Fair, Top Draw. I think those events are really excellent for new businesses to go to anyway, because they quite often have an educational piece to it too. So, for example, I spoke at Spring Fair recently, and they will have an entire series of seminars and talks and everything else. So I think that there's a lot of information that you can gain from there. The stationery show is another one, and definitely go and take advantage of the knowledge building and the networking. And then I think keep your eyes open, keep looking at Instagram, keep looking at other people who catch your eye. Some of them may not be set up to do wholesale, but you can always ask. So I think it's good to almost always be looking. Most people I know who run successful bricks and mortar stores, for example, are kind of always scanning. They're like scanning. They're looking for interesting ideas. They're looking for new brands. So I definitely think that there's a combination. You can do that research on the and also on the big wholesale platforms like Faire. Go to the events, but then also just be constantly on the lookout for interesting products.
Keep your eyes peeled.
Keep your eyes peeled. Yeah.
Another area that's important, particularly when you're selling face-to-face, is customer service. And I think as well, to some extent, when you don't have that face-to-face relationship, when you're working with, your clients are online, little touches like little notes in the orders when you've ordered online and things like that. That can be really important to small businesses. How do they go about getting that right and making sure that staff are delivering on the kind of brand message?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I think old-fashioned customer service is absolutely crucial to retail success. It always has been and always will be, but it's easy to overlook it sometimes, especially in a digital age where people are interacting online. But what customers really want is they want information, they want clarity, and they want to feel like you care. So if you make a mistake, then fix it, and don't feel like that's it, you've ruined everything if you make a mistake. Actually, people often really respond well to a business that can fix the problem that they've got with great customer service. Great customer service is, as said, about clarity, communication. If there's a delivery delay, then you need to be updated. And people don't mind waiting generally if they're being updated. So, for example, for bad customer service, I ordered something for my husband for Christmas and only half of it arrived. It was a two-piece set, and only half of it arrived in time for Christmas. And then I just got no update whatsoever from this company. Eventually, I had to keep emailing them, and then they would say, oh, well, this has happened, that's happened. Well, if they'd sent me an email once a week or once every couple of weeks saying, this is what's happening, this is when you'll get your next update, I would have been much, much happier. So sometimes it's as simple as just giving them the information proactively instead of waiting for them to come to you and ask those questions. Great customer service also can mean great selling service. Offer people the alternatives, the upsells, ask them if they like this, if there's anything they want to add on. If you think back to when you've had a really great selling experience, when a really talented salesperson, they weren't being pushy, but they were just being super helpful.
Yeah.
It's probably will stick in your mind as a really positive experience. So I think about all of those things. In terms of how you make your team, how you make it consistent, then I think, many people when they start off, it is just them. But eventually as they grow, the key thing is having a really clear tone of voice, having a list of commonly asked questions, because probably about 80 to 90% of customer service questions will fall into, a very similar category. Where's my order? This arrived. There was something wrong with it. I'd like to make a return or an exchange. There's only so many different categories of customer service query. So make sure for each one of those, you've gone through what the accepted response is. You're really clear about the tone of voice, the kind of language that you would use. And you can then also, I would suggest, if you have somebody new in who's doing customer service, that you're doing spot checks and you're really clear right from the get-go, not in a confrontational way, but you say when they start, look, just so you know, especially to begin with, I'm going to be really, you may feel like I'm being really picky, but that's because we've got a very specific tone of voice and I'd like you to replicate that. And then that sets the expectation that as you're working with them, that if you say, well, I know you said this will be here next week, but I would have phrased it more like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear you're disappointed. I'd like to let you know that we're very much hoping it will be with you next week. So I've just softened the language or something like that. So don't be afraid to be super prescriptive, because I think that is the key to being able to hand off something like customer service, is knowing that the tone of voice and the approach that you want to have for your customers is being maintained.
Yeah. So moving on, these days we've already talked about this, about the customers coming to your shop, tapping and going and walking away with their purchase in their shopping bag. So technology's become really key to lots of small retail businesses. What kind of software or technology do you have to think about getting on board before you open your shop?
Well, the most simple thing you need is a point of sale. So you need the ability to take payments. You also need, if you're going to be online as well, you need a website. And I would highly recommend having a point of sale and a website that talk to each other. So make sure that if somebody buys something from you online, that that is also updating, or rather I should say vice versa, that if somebody buys something in the shop, that it's updating your online inventory. People can't purchase it from the website. And that if that can be done, well, if you've got the same system, if you're using the same provider for both, for example, then you will absolutely, that will definitely be able to happen. It causes a lot of problems when the two don't sync up. I remember talking to a fabric shop that was losing £1,000 a month of sales. They had to cancel off the website because somebody had come in and purchased something from the shop direct and it hadn't updated. So that is really, really critical. You want it to be easy to use. You want to be able to track your stock. You want to know how much stock you've got, and you want to be able to say, okay, well, this is how much I've sold of these types of product categories, and therefore this is how much stock I've got. And you just want to be able to see that information so that you can really drill into what's working and keeping an eye on keeping your stock tight and keeping it nimble.
Yeah. So your front end's got to basically be talking to the back end so that you're not disappointing customers, and you actually know what you've got available to sell is the key message there.
Yeah, you will save yourself so many headaches if the two things sync up.
Yeah. So how long, if you decided you're going to open a bricks and mortar shop, how long would that typically take once you found your premises?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It really depends on how much work you're going to be doing on it. I mean, I spoke to Joe Touchton Sharp recently from Scamp and Dude, and they're a women's fashion brand, fast growth fashion brand, and they're opening 3 new stores a year for the next 3 years. They've already got 3 UK stores, and they're an interesting business that started online, was e-commerce, had a smaller store, and then actually decided to expand their store base because it was such a great touch point with the community.
Yeah. And
they typically take around 4 to 6 months from the point of signing a contract to opening a store, because they have some really quite elaborate shop fits. They have very strong branding that carries throughout the store. And so for them, that's really critical to get that, to really build out this store experience.
Yeah.
Equally so, I know people who've got the keys to their shop and then opened, 2 to 4 weeks later, because what they did was they went in, they gave everything a coat of paint, they got the fixtures in, they got the product in, and off they went. So I think that it really depends on how much work you want to do to the shop, and also depends on how quickly your landlord can move. So it's let's say anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months.
Yeah. And do you need to worry about things like licensing?
So licensing will be applicable if selling a restricted category, for example, alcohol, if you have things like food on the premises. But generally speaking, no, you have to have your public liability insurance for owning a shop, but you don't need a specific license.
Right.
It may depend. I think the best thing to do, I always caveat with that saying, just check with your local council. They'll be able to help you. Most towns have something called a business improvement district, or BID. Yeah. So they'd be great people to connect with to just double check, but effectively know that unless you're selling restricted categories, you should be fine.
Yeah, just need to make sure, like you say, that you've got your insurance in place.
Yes.
So what tips and advice have you got for someone who's thinking of opening a physical bricks and mortar shop in terms of finding the right place for them?
So the right place, I think, footfall is important. So I would definitely spend some time loitering around with a footfall counter, like try at different times, busy times, quiet times, work out what the footfall is, sit in a local cafe and watch who comes past, see if he looks like they're the right customer for you, look at the businesses around you, make sure that they feel like a good fit, that the people coming to your shop will also be interested, that it's a kind of a place that people you want to shop in your shop will be coming to. So I think being really aware of that, really aware of your footfall, really aware of things like sight lines. So can people see you, or is the shop tucked away down an alley? If it is, are you allowed to put signage out? What are the restrictions? Talk to the other shopkeepers, for sure. Shopkeepers are generally a really nice community, and they generally are interested, and it's in their interest to have another great shop in their local area. So they will definitely be willing to help you.
Yeah. And I suppose there's other things as well, isn't there? It's kind of looking at the general condition of the area. How well maintained is it? How easy is it for customers to park? Or, if you're going to have staff, how easy is it for staff to get to your shop?
For sure.
And things like deliveries as well. They're all sort of things that you have to consider, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And if it is some people take a suboptimal, they may not have all the footfall because they've got a really great audience. And they feel confident they're going to be able to push people, really encourage people to come to that shop. But I think that generally speaking, the better the footfall, the more you're going to have that natural footfall, and you won't have to work as hard to drive it. So it is really important to understand how busy the area is and what's going on. And also what's coming up for the area. Has it just had a big influx of cash, for example, for redevelopment, like some towns have, and what are the plans?
Lease agreements are a tricky area and can be problematic. Lots of small business owners have come unstuck with agreeing to leases that then trap them into all kinds of dilapidations and lease lengths that they can't get out of. What tips have you got for someone who's considering taking on a lease for a retail premises?
Well, I think the first thing I should say is going back to the point about how do you find a place that's right for you, is definitely see if you can try before you buy. Can you do a pop-up? Can you do something really temporary? See how it goes, see what happens. That's the best way to really test out whether or not an area is right for you. And if a property's been empty for a while, you never know, you might be able to get the landlord to agree to let you do a pop-up for a really, inexpensive amount of money, because they also want to test out getting somebody in there who will draw traffic to them. Otherwise, I think always get legal advice, looking over your contracts, asking for a break clause. So at what point can you get out of the lease? Making sure that you've got that built in, so that even if it is a longer lease, what point can you get out if you need to? Making sure you're protecting yourself from that perspective.
So finally, I wanted to sort of wind back to the beginning. You mentioned it at the start that you're involved in the Resilient Retail Club, and I wondered if you could tell listeners a bit more about that. What is it, and how can people find out more?
Sure. So the Resilient Retail Club is my membership group and mastermind for product businesses. The membership has been running since 2020, and we have around 300 members. It's a Facebook group, so really supportive community. We also have an entire catalogue of courses, including one on starting your business, growing your business, profitability, pricing, email marketing, launching, so many different courses, so much different content. And we also have a whole series of live events. So we have planning sessions and expert workshops, and lots of opportunities to ask me questions and ask questions from the other people as well, some of which have been running their businesses for over 10 years. There's a real mix of people who are just starting out and people who've been more established. So it's a great place to come along and join if you're first starting out. And then my mastermind group is my premium option, if you like, so that's working with me one-to-one, and all of that information is on resilientretailclub.com. And I also have a podcast as well, the Resilient Retail Game Plan. So if you're a podcast fan and you want to know more about retail, then go check that out.
Fantastic. So what we'll do then is we'll give links to both of those from the summary notes that will accompany this episode, so people can come and find you online. Finally, I hesitate to ask this question because we've covered so much ground today, but Is there sort of 3 key points that you could pull out from the conversations that we had today of top tips that you would give to someone who's thinking of starting a retail business?
Yes. First of all, know your customer. And when I say that, I mean talk to them, really talk to them, really get to know what they want, and preferably do that before you've spent any money whatsoever on the business. Make sure that you're going and talking to lots of them to find out what they're interested in, what their pain points are, what kind of things they're interested in buying, and the kind of prices that they pay, which will help you so much when you're making decisions further down the line. The second thing is really choose something you're passionate about. Like, I'm not joking when I say that you're going to have to talk about this a lot. So make sure that it's something that you're really passionate about and that you're going to enjoy the creative process of selecting the products, which is always people's favorite part. So make sure it's something that you just love and really, you know, can get up every morning with a spring in your step because you know you're going to work on your dream business. And then the third thing is keep it tight. Don't overcommit on anything really to begin with. Keep it super tight, super nimble. Make sure that you're really focused on trialing and learning and just listening to what the customer's telling you, both verbally but also in the way that they're purchasing from you. So just keep as tight as possible, and there will be times to invest later on, but to the beginning it's all about learning and understanding.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Catherine. It's been really interesting to talk to you, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of takeaway points for our listeners.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, that conversation with Catherine was certainly packed with insights, information and advice for anyone thinking of starting a small retail business. Contrary to the narrative that all retailers are struggling, Catherine has revealed that small retailers are in fact thriving. They're adapting to changing customer expectations and are delivering great retail experiences right across the UK. You might have a passion or a skill that you can turn into a retail business too. You might want to lean into the circular economy, or you might even create your own products and want to bring them to a wider audience, either through an online presence or with your own bricks and mortar store. Whatever your retail dream, Catherine has shared some great tips and advice here that can help you bring it to reality. You can find links to Catherine in the Resilient Retail Club in the summary notes. We've also pulled together a range of resources from across the donut sites that can help you with everything from pricing your products to negotiating a lease, and you'll also find these in the summary notes at www.startyourownbusinesspodcast.co.uk. I hope you found this episode interesting and helpful, and if you did, please spread the word so we can help even more business owners who are starting and running a small business. Finally, another big thank you to Catherine for her time and insights. Until next time, all the best.
Square is tailor-made for all retailers, whether you're a small business or a multi-location retailer. Square's retail POS system includes all the tools your retail business needs, including payments, inventory management and e-commerce. And that's just for starters. Used by over 4 million businesses, easy to use and with no hidden costs, Square will help your business fly. Find out more about Square's retail POS systems at square.com.